Days stopped having names. The sun no longer marked mornings or nights, only moments when the light seeped through the cracks in the hut's worn walls. Sometimes it glowed golden and warm, like a distant promise. Other times it barely touched her skin, pale and gray like memory. Odessa stopped counting the days. At first, she scratched tallies into the wooden post inside the hut, each mark a cry of survival. But one morning she stared at the crooked lines and couldn't remember if she had marked yesterday or the day before. They blurred. Like everything else. She learned the rhythm of silence. At first, it screamed at her, the way silence does when you're used to voices, laughter, footsteps. It was thick, suffocating. But over time she molded it into something else. A quiet companion. A mirror. A prayer. She named the spiders that lived in the corners. The black one with long legs she called Sorrow, and the fat one near the window hole was Mina. They spun webs above her like delicate canopies, translucent crowns for a queen without a throne. She spoke to them sometimes, not expecting answers but offering comfort. The way she used to comfort Nia when she was small, afraid of storms. And Odessa began to remember. Her sister's laughter, wild and untamed like wind through leaves. The way Nia would tug her wrist and beg for another story, another tale from their mother's lips. The lullabies. The chants. The old rituals. They lived in Odessa's mind like soft embers refusing to die. But not all her memories were full. There were gaps. Hollows where something should have been. Faces she couldn't quite see. A specific day when her mother wept beneath the baobab tree, but she didn't know why. Or a moment when Nia screamed in the night, and Odessa wasn't there. She pressed her fingers to her temples and tried to pull those moments into shape, but they slid through her like water. That, more than the silence, terrified her. It was in the silence that the whispers began. At first she thought it was wind. The breeze slipping through the cracks, curling around her ears. But the sounds were too deliberate, too full of breath and syllables. They didn't speak with words she understood, not at first. But they felt like words. Some came with the morning light, sweet, humming. Others drifted in on moonless nights, cold, ancient. They curled around her spine and made her skin tingle. They didn't frighten her. Not entirely. Because despite their strangeness, they felt familiar. One night, lying awake with her hands across her chest, she felt something touch her forehead. Not a hand, not physical. But a presence. Soft as dew, firm as truth. Her body stilled. The whisper came clearly then from inside and all around. She remembers the forgotten. She carries the key. Odessa sat up sharply. Her breath caught in her throat. But there was no one there. Just sorrow spinning a new thread. From that night onward, the whispers came more often. And with them dreams. In one dream, she walked barefoot in a forest lit by blue fireflies. Nia stood ahead, back turned, humming the old lullaby. But when Odessa reached out, her sister dissolved into petals. In another, a woman, her mother, held her face and whispered in a language she didn't know. The words burned into her mind. When she woke, her palms were warm and her chest ached with longing. She began to believe that she wasn't alone in the hut. That the walls, the floor, the spiders, even the dirt, had ears. That they were listening. Remembering. One afternoon, she pressed her palm to the floor and whispered a single word, "Why?" And something answered. Not with sound but with a pulse like a heartbeat. Her own? Or something beneath her. The next day she found a small feather in her food bowl, white, soft, from no bird she knew. She took it as a sign. So she began to tell stories. To the hut. To the forest. To the silence. She spoke of her childhood. Her mother's cooking. The way Nia used to wrap her arms around her waist. She told the story of how Kofi had once carved her name into a tree and promised to never hurt her. And then the story of how he changed. How his eyes went dark. How she still didn't know what she had done to deserve the door. And the more she spoke, the stronger she felt. The whispers returned, louder now, clearer. They spoke in fragments. The veil grows thin. Blood remembers. The song is broken. She must mend it. Odessa didn't know what they meant, but deep inside, something cracked open. Like an egg split under soft hands. Something awoke. She began to dream not only of Nia and her mother, but of places she had never seen. A river that flowed backward. A mountain that bled gold. A woman with eyes like hers, draped in feathers, walking through fire. And still the memories danced, some sharp, others distant. There were entire years she could not place. And always, the feeling that someone had hidden something from her. Something she once knew. Something vital. The silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like preparation. One night she woke to a sound. Not a whisper. Not a dream. A knock. 3 taps. Soft. Deliberate. Her heart pounded. No one had knocked on the hut's door in years. She held her breath and waited. But nothing came. The wind blew through the cracks again, carrying with it the scent of something familiar, charcoal smoke and gardenia and Nia's perfume. Adissa pressed her face to the dirt floor and wept. The years of silence had not broken her. They had made her ready. The storm came without warning. At first it was only a whisper in the wind, a low hum that stirred the dust around the hut like a restless spirit. Adissa sat in the dark, listening. Her back against the wall, her arms curled around her knees. She had learned the difference between a breeze and a storm, just as she had learned the difference between loneliness and silence. But this was neither. This was something else. The sky cracked open with a sound like bones splitting. Thunder rolled through the earth and rattled the floor beneath her. The spiders scurried to the corners. Sorrow vanished. Mina dropped from her web. The very walls of the hut moaned, old wood groaning under pressure. Then came the rain, thick and angry. It slammed against the roof like fists. The wind howled, and Adissa swore she heard her name carried in it, long and stretched, triple. Asa, like the forest itself was calling her. She pressed her hands over her ears, tried to drown it out, but her pulse was louder. She felt it in her wrists, her throat, her teeth. A rising drumbeat. Another crack of thunder, and something snapped above her. A section of the hut's roof tore free, flung into the night by the wind. Rain poured through the gap, soaking her instantly. Lightning flashed, illuminating the inside of the hut in bursts, like a flickering memory. And then she saw it. Through the hole, beyond the broken wall, the forest. Not the vague impression of trees she'd glimpsed through cracks or shadows on the ground, but the forest in full. Wild. Alive. Lit in pale lightning, shimmering silver and black. Every leaf glowed like it had been dipped in stars. She stood slowly, feet sinking into the wet earth. Her breath caught. Something ancient stirred inside her. Not fear, not yet, but knowing. The same kind of knowing she felt in her dreams. The same presence that whispered in the silence. The wind tore through the open space again, and this time it didn't howl, it sang. Not a song she could hum. Not one with words. But her bones knew it. Her blood responded. She stepped toward the broken wall. The floor creaked beneath her. Water dripped from her braids. Her dress, thin and old, clung to her skin. She reached out and placed her palm against the splintered edge of the opening. Cold air rushed over her arm, and with it came the scent of home. Not the hut, not her prison, but home. The village. The earth after rain. Her mother's stew. Nia's skin after they bathed in the stream. A gust of wind hit the hut again, and with a groan, one entire wall collapsed outward, as if the forest itself was tearing the door off her cage. Her eyes widened. Her chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. And then she ran. No shoes. No cloak. No plan. Just bare feet slapping against wet ground, carrying her into the storm. Branches scratched her arms. Mud sucked at her heels. Thorns tore her dress. She didn't care. She ran like a hunted thing. Like the wind had caught her by the ribs and wouldn't let go. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. That she could get away. And the forest, it didn't stop her. It didn't tangle her or trap her. It opened. Roots shifted. Trees leaned aside. Paths revealed themselves like memories returned. She didn't question it. Her breath came in ragged bursts. Her body ached. But with every step, a layer of numbness peeled off her. She felt again. Felt the rain wash over her skin like blessing. Felt the air burn in her lungs like truth. She stumbled once, knee scraping against stone. Blood bloomed across her shin, but she pushed forward. Her thoughts spun. Why now? Why did the storm come like that? Why did the walls fall? Why was the forest helping her? And yet, she didn't need the answers. Not yet. Not when the sky opened up and wept like it had been holding back for years. Not when she reached the edge of the trees and saw the first flickering torchlight of the village in the distance. Her breath hitched. She hadn't seen it in so long. Not the huts. Not the paths. Not the broken wooden fence at the goat pen. But it was all there. Smaller than she remembered. Faded. But real. She took a step forward, then another. Lightning flashed behind her, throwing her long shadow in front of her like a dark echo. And then she stopped. Because just ahead, standing in the center of the path, holding a flickering lantern, was a girl. Slim, with long braids, a red sash tied around her waist. Her face was turned away, but Adissa knew that shape. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Nia?" The girl turned. And for a moment everything else, the storm, the pain, the fear, vanished. Because it was Nia. Older, changed, but it was her. And her eyes were full of something Adissa couldn't name. Not joy. Not relief. Something deeper. Something darker. The wind surged one last time and the storm began to fade. Adissa stood in the rain, soaked to the bone, heart pounding. The hut was gone. The cage was gone. Adissa stood at the edge of her old village, the rain still trickling down her face, though the storm had passed. The wind was softer now, and the trees no longer leaned in like curious onlookers. But the silence, it was wrong. Not quiet. Hollow. The huts were the same shape, same spacing, but the colors were off, faded, drained. Smoke rose from only a few chimneys. Doors were closed even though it was not yet night. And the people? She stepped onto the main path barefoot, mud clinging to her heels, and a child looked up from beside a cooking pot, stared. Wide eyes. No blink. Then the child dropped the spoon and ran. Adissa froze. Another woman came out of her hut, maybe to scold the child, but her eyes landed on Adissa, and her face twisted, not in surprise but fear. Not a gasp. Not a question. Just a slow backing away like she'd seen a ghost. She dropped the basket she carried and stumbled into her doorway, slamming the wooden door shut. Adissa's heart sank. She walked farther into the village, but each step brought new stares, each face more alarmed than the last. Not one voice spoke her name. No hands reached for her. No tears of welcome. No shouts of relief. Just whispers behind doors. Peeking eyes. Gasps quickly smothered behind palms. She passed the well. The same one she and Nia used to draw water from. The place where she'd once laughed with her friends, flirted with the young hunters, sang songs while scrubbing her feet in the basin nearby. Now it sat unused. Moss creeping over the stones. And her name floated on the wind, fragmented, twisted. Thought she died. A spirit? Don't meet her eyes. She wanted to scream. To tell them she was real. That she'd been alive. That she hadn't vanished, she'd been taken. But she didn't. She walked like a shadow among them. A living ghost in her own memory. Her bare feet carried her toward the village center, where the temple now rose, bigger than before, freshly painted, draped in crimson and gold cloths. A wooden archway stood tall before it, etched with symbols she didn't recognize. Spirals. Twisting vines. People gathered near it in hushed clusters, dressed in ceremonial robes, their skin painted in ash and oil. And there, standing on the temple steps, tall and still like a statue carved by gods, Nia. Adissa's heart twisted. It was her sister, no doubt. The same proud chin, the same deep-set eyes. But she was draped in long red robes, braided hair wound into a crown, gold dust shimmering across her cheeks. She held a carved staff in one hand, its tip shaped like a crescent moon. People bowed to her. Bowed. Nia raised a hand, the crowd dropped to silence. Adissa ducked behind a hut wall, breath caught in her throat. She peeked again, heart pounding. Nia's voice rang out clear, calm, rehearsed. She was the head priestess. And she looked powerful, regal, but also cold. Adissa watched her sister bless a child, place a hand on a man's chest, offer herbs to a coughing elder. The villagers clung to every word, every motion. They revered her, feared her even. And yet, Nia never once smiled. Never once laughed the way she used to when they chased fireflies under the mango trees. Something was missing. Or worse, something had taken its place. Adissa slunk away as the ceremony ended, slipping into the shadows of an abandoned hut near the forest edge. She curled into the corner, shivering from the rain, and tried to piece it together. Why did they treat her like a spirit? Why was her sister now the village priestess? Why did it feel like the heart of the village had been carved out and replaced with silence? She closed her eyes and thought back to before the hut. Before her husband locked her away. The last days she remembered with Nia. The strange glances between them. Nia's long disappearances. That one night, the one Adissa could never remember clearly, where their father had shouted, their mother had cried, and Nia had clung to her, whispering promises she couldn't recall. There was a hole in her memory. A void. And her gut told her that whatever had filled that void was now wearing her sister's face. She peeked through the cracks of the old hut wall. The villagers were dispersing. Nia was alone on the steps now, her back turned. Watching the trees. Adissa felt it again, the hum in her chest. The thing that had stirred when the hut had broken. It buzzed faintly now in the back of her throat. Not fear. Warning. Something unnatural hung over the village. Like smoke that didn't rise. Like music played out of tune. And her sister, her beloved Nia? She was at the center of it. Adissa leaned against the damp wall, closed her eyes, and whispered the lullaby she'd hummed in the hut. The one memory that had kept her whole. From the trees something rustled in response. The wind carried her tune back to her, but now it was layered. Not alone. Two voices. And in that moment, Adissa knew she was being watched, not by Nia, not by the villagers, but by the forest. It hadn't finished with her. Not yet. Adissa waited in the shadows, heart pounding in her chest. The village had quieted now, the torches dimming, the villagers retreating into their homes, leaving only the distant sounds of the night. But she didn't dare sleep. Not yet. Nia had gone to the temple, as she did every evening. But tonight there was something different. The way Nia had stood on the steps earlier, eyes scanning the horizon like she was looking for something. Or someone. Adissa had watched her sister move into the forest just past the village outskirts, her figure swallowed by the night. And for a moment, fear had gripped her, fear of being seen, of being caught. But then the curiosity had outweighed it. The strange pull she felt toward the forest, the hum in her chest, the whispers from the wind, they all urged her to follow. So she did. Barefoot, she slipped between the trees, the damp earth beneath her feet, the scent of moss and earth filling her senses. She moved carefully, trying to remain unseen, but the forest, strangely, seemed to part for her. The branches didn't snag at her hair, the underbrush didn't catch her feet. It was as if it too knew she was meant to be there. She kept her distance as she followed Nia, her heart heavy with dread. What was her sister up to? Why had she come here, far from the village, to this part of the forest? A place Adissa had never ventured to as a child. It was said to be sacred, a place where no one dared to tread, not even the most devout of priests. Nia moved with purpose, her steps sure and confident. She was headed for the heart of the grove, where the trees seemed to twist and writhe like ancient snakes, their bark etched with symbols Adissa had never seen. The air grew thick with something indescribable, like the forest was holding its breath. Adissa crouched low, hiding behind a large oak, watching as Nia approached a stone altar at the center of the grove. The altar was covered in moss, the stones darkened by age and time, but there was something pulsing beneath it, an energy that vibrated through the air. The very ground felt alive. Nia stood before the altar, her hands raised above her head, her face illuminated by the moonlight. She murmured something under her breath, words Adissa couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable, commanding, ritualistic. Then the air shifted. A low, guttural growl rumbled from deep within the earth. Adissa's skin prickled, and her breath caught in her throat as shadows began to stretch unnaturally from the altar. Figures, twisted and grotesque, started to emerge, spirits maybe or something worse. Their faces were obscured by hoods, their forms elongated and dark, flickering like flames in the wind. Nia didn't flinch. She stood tall, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light as she called out to the spirits, her words growing louder, more powerful. Adissa's heart hammered in her chest. She had to stop this. She had to confront her sister. But she couldn't move. Her feet felt like stone, frozen in place by the sight before her. The ritual continued and the air grew colder, heavier. The spirits circled the altar, their movements erratic, as if they were drawn to the very words Nia spoke. The earth seemed to shake and a bright, otherworldly light flickered beneath the stone, illuminating the grove in a sickly green hue. Nia stepped forward and the spirits parted for her. She placed her hands upon the stone, her fingers tracing the ancient symbols, murmuring louder now. The ground trembled beneath her and the air crackled with power. Adissa's breath caught in her throat when she saw what Nia was doing, what she was about to do. She was calling forth something, someone, from the depths of the earth. Something that had been bound for centuries. Something dark. And in that moment, everything came crashing down. The forest groaned and the earth split open. A vision flooded Adissa's mind. She saw her own reflection in a pool of water, but it wasn't her face staring back. It was Nia's. Nia's face twisted in jealousy and hatred. She saw the years of resentment building up, the quiet rage Nia had harbored since childhood. The times Nia had grown distant, cold, and cruel. The secret glances, the words left unsaid. The unspoken jealousy of everything Adissa had been, everything she had once been. And then the truth hit her like a slap to the face. Nia hadn't betrayed her husband. Nia had betrayed her. Her sister had made a deal with the spirits long ago, a pact to gain power, to become the priestess she had always dreamed of, to claim the power Adissa had been born with. Adissa's beauty, her joy, her love for life had been the catalyst for Nia's jealousy. And when Nia had seen Odissa marry the village hunter, the last of the men who had admired her, Nia had snapped. She had used Odissa as a sacrifice to fulfill the ritual, locking her away in the hut, keeping her imprisoned while she gained the village's trust and power. Odyssa's knees buckled beneath her as the weight of the realization crushed her. Her own flesh and blood had been the architect of her suffering. She had locked her away to become stronger, to rise above her. The spirits howled as they merged into one dark mass, swirling around Nia. Odissa could barely breathe, could barely think. The truth, the crushing truth, hit her like a tidal wave. Nia was no longer the sister she had loved. She had become something else. Something far darker. The spirits screeched and whirled around Nia, who stood in the center, her eyes now completely white, her body glowing with an unnatural light. The ritual had been completed. And the forest began to laugh. Odyssa's chest tightened. The sister she had once known was gone, and in her place stood a creature of darkness, forged by envy and bound by blood. The night was no longer hers. It was Nia's. With one last desperate breath, Odissa turned and fled into the night, knowing that her journey had only just begun. The truth had been uncovered, but now she had to survive the aftermath. Odissa stumbled through the dense forest, her feet barely finding purchase on the slick, uneven ground. The truth weighed heavily on her heart, a stone she could not shake. Nia's betrayal, the ritual, the dark power she had stolen, it was too much to process. The world around her seemed to spin, the trees blurring into shadows that twisted and stretched, as if they too were mourning the death of innocence. She could feel the forest watching her, its ancient eyes upon her, its roots stirring beneath the earth, pulling at her soul. The whispers grew louder, and with each step the air thickened, pressing down on her chest. The forest, the same one she had once known so well, felt foreign. No longer a place of comfort and beauty, it had become a realm of sorrow, regret, and power that she could not begin to comprehend. And then, as if answering her silent cry, the air around her shifted. The wind stilled, and the whispers softened into a song, soft yet profound, as though the earth itself were singing a lullaby. A figure appeared before her. At first she thought it was an illusion, a trick of the mind, but the figure was real, a glowing presence, radiant and ethereal, standing in the clearing ahead. It was an old woman, her form barely solid, her face a blur of age and wisdom, her hair flowing in a light breeze that didn't seem to exist. Odissa, the spirit spoke, its voice gentle yet commanding, carrying the weight of centuries. Do not fear. I am here to guide you. Odyssa's heart skipped a beat. She had heard stories of the ancestral spirits, guardians of the forest, ancient beings that watched over the people of the village. But to meet one? To be spoken to by one? It was beyond her understanding. She felt small, insignificant before this spirit, but also strangely comforted by its presence. I don't understand, Odissa whispered, her voice trembling. Why am I here? What is happening? What do I do now? The spirit's eyes, or what appeared to be eyes, glowed with a soft, calming light. You have been chosen to bear witness to the truth, Odissa. The balance must be restored, for what was stolen must be returned. The wind around her picked up again, and the trees began to sway as the spirit continued. You were meant to inherit a gift, Odissa. A gift of spirit, of connection to the earth, the sky, and all that lives between them. It is a power granted only to those with a pure heart and unbroken will. But your sister Nia has taken what was not hers. She has stolen what was always meant to be yours. Odyssa's breath caught in her throat as the weight of the spirit's words hit her. The gift. The power that Nia had sought. The power that had driven her sister to betray her, to lock her away. It wasn't just ambition. It wasn't just jealousy. Nia had stolen something far more dangerous. The gift was something sacred, something beyond human comprehension. Why did Nia do this? Odissa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why couldn't she come to me? Why steal what was meant to be mine? The spirit sighed, a sound like the wind through the leaves, deep with sorrow. Nia's heart was clouded with envy. She was drawn to the power you held without knowing it, without understanding the weight it carried. She thought she could control it, shape it to her will, and in doing so she sought to become the very thing she admired most. But she was wrong. Odyssa's mind raced. How could Nia have been so blinded by greed? Her sister, her closest friend, had chosen power over family. And now the consequences were more dire than Odissa could have imagined. But, how do I stop her? Odissa asked, her voice shaky. How do I fix this? The village, the spirits, they are all caught in this lie. The spirit's gaze softened. You must decide, Odissa. The balance is not for me to restore. It is for you and only you. Nia's actions have consequences, but she is not beyond redemption. She must face the judgment of the spirits. Adissa felt the ground beneath her shift, the earth humming with energy. In an instant, the forest around her vanished, replaced by a vast, open space of swirling mist and light. The spirit realm. Here the air was thick with power, and every inch of the space seemed alive with ancient knowledge. Shadows danced across the mist, flickering in and out like ghosts, but no voice could be heard except the one speaking to her. This is the realm of the spirits, the voice of the ancestor echoed. Here all things are weighed. All actions are judged. Before her, a large stone table appeared, its surface etched with intricate symbols. In front of the table stood two figures. One was Nia, her face twisted in fear and defiance, her eyes still glowing with unnatural power. The other figure was a spectral form, not fully visible but immense, a being of pure light, of truth and justice. You must decide, Adissa, the spirit said again. What is Nia's fate? Will you forgive her, or will you allow the spirits to claim her for her actions? Adissa's heart raced. She couldn't breathe. Forgiveness seemed impossible. But to condemn her sister, to let the spirits take her, was that truly justice? Or was it vengeance? Her mind swirled with memories, Nia as a child playing with her, laughing, sharing dreams of the future. But then there were the whispers, the betrayals, the lies, the darkness that had been growing within Nia for years, creeping silently, until it consumed her completely. Adissa had lived through torment, through isolation. Her soul had been torn apart, but in her heart she still saw her sister, still remembered the girl she had once loved. The light from the spectral figure grew brighter, urging her to make her decision. Adissa closed her eyes, the weight of the world on her shoulders. The choice was hers and hers alone. What would she do? What was truly right? I will decide, Adissa whispered, her voice trembling but steady. But Nia must face the truth, all of it. The spirit nodded, its form glowing even brighter. Then the judgment will begin. The air around her thickened, the ground beneath her feet vibrating. The judgment was not a simple matter. It was a decision that would change the course of not only her life, but Nia's, and the balance of all things. And with that, Adissa took the first step toward what would be the hardest decision of her life. The fate of her sister, her village, and the spirits rested in her hands. Adissa walked back to the village under a sky that shimmered with the colors of dusk. The stars were starting to emerge, blinking like the eyes of spirits, watching her every step. Her heart was heavy, but her resolve was clear. She had seen enough, not just in the spirit realm but within her own soul. This was the moment that would define everything. The festival was in full swing when she arrived, the sound of drums and voices filling the air. The village, once her home, was alive with celebration, its people unaware of the darkness festering beneath the surface. The music played and the firelight danced, casting long shadows across the ground. People laughed, children ran, and the air smelled of roasting meats and sweet fruits. But to Adissa, it all felt hollow, a facade, a cruel game played while secrets bubbled beneath. As she entered the heart of the village, the chatter and festivities slowed. Eyes turned toward her, wide with surprise and confusion. There was no recognition at first. The woman they had thought lost to time, the one who had disappeared into the forest, had returned. But this was not the same woman they had locked away in that hut. This was someone new, someone different, someone who had seen the truth. Nia stood near the sacred tree, her face painted with symbols of power, her regal stance marking her as the village's new leader. The role of head priestess suited her, but there was a coldness about her that did not belong. Her eyes locked with Adissa's and a flicker of recognition passed across her face, quickly hidden by a mask of arrogance. Adissa's gaze did not waver. She knew the truth now, and it burned within her like a fire she could not extinguish. She was not here for revenge, she was here for justice. The village needed to know what Nia had done, needed to see the deception for what it was. She stepped forward, and the crowd parted without a word, almost as if the earth itself recognized the significance of her return. Her voice, when it came, was clear and steady, carrying through the night air. The time has come for the truth to be revealed, Adissa said, her voice slicing through the chatter like a sharp blade. Nia, you have taken what was never meant for you. You have betrayed not just me, but the very balance of this land, the spirits and the people of this village. Nia's face tightened, her eyes narrowing. She opened her mouth to speak, but Adissa held up a hand, silencing her. You locked me away in that hut, told everyone I was cursed, unstable. You made them believe I was a danger. But the truth, Nia, is far darker than you ever let them know. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. The quiet murmurs that followed were laced with disbelief, fear, and confusion. How could the woman they thought was mad speak with such clarity and power? Nia stepped forward, her face a mask of feigned calm, but Adissa could see the tremble in her hands. "You know nothing, Adissa. You don't understand the sacrifices I made for this village," she said, her voice trembling with an edge of desperation. "This was never about me. It was about our people. About protecting them." Adissa's eyes flashed, her anger welling up within her, but she kept her voice steady. "You speak of protection, Nia, but you never understood what true protection was. I was meant to inherit the gift of the spirits, the connection to the earth and its power. But you took it because you wanted it for yourself. You made a deal with spirits who were never meant to be controlled. And you've lived a lie ever since." The crowd gasped. They had heard whispers, of course, but never anything concrete. It was a scandal they had long buried, uncomfortable and easy to dismiss. But now the truth was in the open and it was undeniable. Nia's eyes darted nervously, her hands twitching at her sides. Adissa did not look away. "You used the power you stole from me to deceive, to control, and to manipulate. You pretended to lead us in the name of the spirits, but the spirits are not yours to command. They have been watching. They know the truth." With a slow, deliberate motion, Adissa reached into the folds of her gown and pulled out a small, glowing stone, a gift from the spirit realm. She raised it high, and a wave of energy rippled through the village. The earth seemed to hum, the trees swayed, and the wind picked up in a sudden rush. The spirits were awakening, responding to the call. Nia's confident facade began to crack. Her eyes grew wide as the energy around her intensified. She stepped back, her feet dragging against the ground as if the very earth itself was pushing against her. What are you doing?" Nia's voice quivered with fear now. The power she had once controlled was slipping from her grasp. "I am restoring the balance," Adissa said, her voice calm but filled with power. "The spirits have watched you long enough. They have witnessed your betrayal, your lies. They will not allow you to continue this deception any longer." The ground beneath Nia's feet cracked, and the air around her thickened with energy. The villagers backed away, some falling to their knees as the spirits made their presence known. Shapes of light and shadow flickered in the trees, their forms indistinct but powerful. The very fabric of the village seemed to tremble as if the land itself was acknowledging the truth of Adissa's words. Nia screamed as the spirits rose around her, their judgment absolute. She reached out toward Adissa, her face contorted with terror. "No. You can't do this. I did this for you. For all of us." Adissa remained unmoving, her gaze steady. "You didn't do this for me, Nia. You did it for your own thirst for power. And now you must face the consequences." The spirits encircled Nia, their energy enveloping her in a light so bright it blinded all who witnessed it. The ground trembled beneath her as the spirits pulled her into their grasp, lifting her from the earth. Nia's screams faded into the distance as she was taken, her fate sealed. The village was silent, the air heavy with the weight of what had just occurred. Adissa stood tall, watching the spirits fade back into the trees, their work done. The villagers, still in shock, began to stir, their fear replaced with reverence. Adissa's heart was heavy, but it was not with sorrow. The balance had been restored. Nia had paid the price for her betrayal, and now it was time for healing. "I have not returned for vengeance," Adissa spoke once more, her voice strong and clear. "I have returned to set things right. Let us remember the spirits, the land, and the balance we must uphold. We must learn from the past so that it is never repeated." With that, Adissa turned away from the villagers, her heart at peace. The truth had been revealed, and justice had been served. Now it was time for the village, and for her, to heal. As the festival resumed, quieter and more somber, the village would forever remember the night the truth came to light, the night Adissa, the true one, returned. Adissa had returned to the edge of the forest, the place where her journey had begun and where, in many ways, it would now end. The village no longer feared her as they once had, no longer regarded her as an outsider or a curse. Instead they respected her. Reverence flowed from them like the steady stream that wound its way through the heart of the woods, carrying with it the whispers of those who had long since learned the value of truth. She lived in a small dwelling on the fringes of the forest, where the trees whispered their ancient songs and the wind carried messages from the spirits. The hut she now called home was humble, made of wood and stone, but it felt like a sanctuary, a place of peace, not imprisonment. The walls were adorned with simple carvings of the spirits, gifts from the elders and artifacts from the lands she had visited in her travels. The light of the sun, the moon, and the stars filtered through the canopy of trees that surrounded her home, casting long, dappled shadows across the earth. It was a place of balance, a place where the spirit and the physical world met in harmony. Each morning she would wake early before the village had stirred and walk out into the woods. There she would offer her prayers to the spirits, those she had come to know intimately. The forest had become her second home, not as a place of exile but as a sanctuary. Here she found the peace she had longed for. Here she could listen to the wisdom of the ancients, and the spirits would answer her with quiet murmurs that only she could understand. The people of the village no longer whispered behind her back or cast wary glances her way. She had become a part of their lives in a way that felt natural, inevitable. Children would run to her house, eager to hear her stories. They had heard tales of the woman who had been locked away in a hut, forgotten by the world, but who had returned to reveal the deepest secrets of the village. They whispered of the day when the truth had walked back from the woods, a day when the spirits had risen and the land had trembled with revelation. Adissa, however, did not revel in the stories told of her. She did not seek praise or admiration. The truth she had uncovered had not been for glory. It had been a duty, a responsibility, a calling she had not fully understood until it had been placed upon her shoulders. Now, with Nia's betrayal exposed and the village freed from the shadows of the past, she was content. The children would sit at her feet, wide-eyed and filled with wonder, as she spoke of the spirits, of the power that resided in the earth, in the wind, in the very bones of the world. She told them of balance, of the sacred duty to honor the natural forces that governed all life. But she also told them of forgiveness, of redemption, and the price of power. Do not seek power for its own sake, she would say, her voice soft but firm, for the spirits will not grant it lightly. And when they do, they ask for a heavy price. Use your gifts to protect, to heal, and to preserve the balance. Do not let greed take root in your heart, for it will lead you down a path of darkness. Her words were not just lessons, they were warnings, echoes of her own past, lessons learned the hard way. And the children listened, for they understood that she spoke with the wisdom of experience, with the authority of someone who had lived through the consequences of betrayal and had come out the other side, stronger and more grounded. In the evenings, when the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the vast expanse of the sky, Adissa would sit outside, her eyes gazing into the distance. She no longer felt the weight of anger or bitterness. Instead she felt peace. The spirits had granted her the strength to heal, and now she was a healer in her own right. Those who sought her guidance, who sought solace from their struggles, came to her with respect and hope. And she gave them what she could, wisdom, insight, and sometimes a quiet presence that spoke more than words ever could. Over time the village began to prosper again. With Adissa's guidance they rebuilt what had been torn down, not just in the physical sense but in the spiritual sense as well. The balance between the human world and the spirit realm had been restored, and the villagers learned to live in harmony with both. They honored the spirits, cared for the land, and shared their wealth with those in need. The darkness that had once tainted their hearts had lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of community and respect. Adissa never sought to be a leader. She had never craved power or control. But in her presence, the people found the guidance they needed. They came to understand the importance of truth, of standing up for what was right, and of respecting the balance that had been so easily disturbed. And in this way her legacy grew, not through grand gestures, but through the quiet power of her wisdom and the example she set every day. As the years passed, stories of Adissa's strength and kindness spread beyond the village. Travelers came from distant lands, hoping to meet the woman who had spoken to spirits, who had returned from the forest to set the world right. And each time they came, they left with a piece of her wisdom, a piece of the truth that had shaped her journey. Her story became a legend, one of triumph, of courage, of a woman who had faced the darkness and emerged into the light. And so, the people of the village came to see her not as a figure of fear, but as a symbol of peace. She was no longer just a woman who had been locked away in a hut, but a wise woman who had brought the light of truth back to the world. She had become part of the land itself, woven into its fabric like the trees and the winds. Her spirit lived on in the stories told by the children, in the songs sung by the elders, and in the whispers of the forest that always seemed to speak her name. Adissa had found her peace, not through revenge but through understanding. She had learned that true power was not in holding control over others, but in knowing when to release it, when to listen, and when to trust the spirits of the world to guide you. And in that trust she had found her purpose. The woman who spoke to spirits had become a legend, and her legacy would live on forever in the hearts of those who knew the truth. Time passed, as it always does, and with it, Adissa settled into her new role as the spiritual guide and protector of the village. The once fearful whispers that followed her steps had slowly faded, replaced by words of admiration and trust. The people no longer viewed her with the suspicion and dread that had once plagued them. Instead, they saw her for what she truly was, a woman of wisdom, strength, and grace. Her journey had been long and filled with suffering, but she had emerged from it not only unbroken but more powerful than ever. Adissa had chosen to live on the outskirts of the village, at the edge of the forest where the trees whispered their ancient secrets. The forest had always been her sanctuary, and now it was also her home. She had a small dwelling, humble yet comforting, a place where she could retreat to when the weight of her responsibilities grew too heavy. The land around her was rich with life, and the air was thick with the energy of the spirits she had learned to commune with. Here, at the boundary of the human world and the spiritual realm, she felt connected to everything: the land, the village, and the spirits that watched over them all. Her bond with the spirit world had deepened in the years that followed her return. Where once she had been a mere vessel for their judgment, she had now become a trusted ally and guide. The spirits spoke to her freely, offering wisdom and guidance not only for herself but for the people who came seeking answers. Her connection to them was no longer a gift she had been forced to accept. It had become a part of her, something that was as much a part of her as her own breath. It was a gift she had earned, one that she had fought for with every ounce of her being. As the years passed, the village flourished. Peace settled over the land like a soft blanket, and harmony reigned between the human world and the spirits. The balance that had been so disrupted by Nia's greed and betrayal was now restored. People from neighboring villages and even from distant lands came to seek Adissa's counsel. They sought her wisdom, hoping to learn from the woman who had communed with spirits and brought peace to her people. She was no longer just a woman, she had become a legend, a living myth, a figure of reverence. Adissa was not just a healer of bodies but a healer of spirits. Her teachings were sought after by many. She taught the villagers about balance, about the delicate equilibrium between the natural forces of the world, the human realm, and the spirit realm. She spoke of the importance of truth, of understanding the deeper meanings of the world around them. She taught them to respect the spirits and to live in harmony with the earth. And most of all, she taught them the lesson that had been the foundation of her own redemption, that healing begins within, and that only through truth can one truly find peace. Adissa's wisdom became a beacon of hope and guidance. Children would gather around her, sitting at her feet as she spoke of the past, of the spirits, and of the lessons they had taught her. She would tell them stories of the forest, of the spirits that lived there, and of the lessons they imparted. The children listened with rapt attention, hanging on every word she spoke. To them, she was not just a teacher but a living connection to a world they could not see but could feel, the world of the spirits. They came to her with their questions and fears, and she would answer them with the patience of one who had lived through great suffering and emerged stronger for it. As her reputation grew, people from distant lands began to seek her out. They came to hear her words, to learn from the woman who spoke to spirits. They traveled from far and wide, crossing rivers and mountains, just for a chance to sit in her presence and listen to the wisdom she had to offer. And Adissa welcomed them all. She shared her knowledge freely, knowing that the more people learned to live in harmony with the world, the more peace would spread across the lands. Her teachings became a foundation for a new way of life, one that respected the earth, the spirits, and the balance between all things. The village itself had transformed. Once a place of fear and isolation, it had become a thriving community, united by the wisdom Adissa had shared. The people now lived in harmony with the natural world, and their bond with the spirit realm was strong. They had learned to honor the spirits, to listen to the whispers of the wind and the rustle of the trees, and to find peace in the quiet moments. The once scarred land had healed, and so too had the people. They had learned from their mistakes, and under Adissa's guidance they had grown stronger. In the quiet of the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Adissa would sit outside her dwelling, gazing into the depths of the forest. The whispers of the spirits were always with her, filling her mind with thoughts of the past and the future. She reflected on how far she had come. She was no longer the woman who had been locked away, forgotten in a hut on the edge of the forest. She was no longer the woman who had been betrayed by the one person she had loved most in the world. She had healed from all of that. She had become someone new, someone who had the power to heal others, to restore balance, and to protect the village she loved. Her journey had not been an easy one, but it had shaped her into the woman she was now. She had faced betrayal, loss, and isolation, and yet she had risen above it all. The darkness of her past had only made her light shine brighter. She had become a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience and a testament to the power of truth and redemption. Odysseus' story was passed down through the generations. The villagers told their children of the woman who had spoken to spirits and brought balance to the world. They told of the betrayal she had suffered, and of how she had emerged from the darkness stronger than ever. Her story became a legend, a tale of strength, healing, and the power of truth. It was a story that would continue to inspire generations to come, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal and darkness, there is always the possibility of redemption and light. And as the years passed, Odysseus' name was still spoken in the whispers of the forest, carried on the wind, and passed from one generation to the next. She had become more than just a woman. She had become a part of the very fabric of the village, a living connection to the spirits and the lessons they had taught. In the hearts of the people she would always remain, a legend that would never fade.